So, a handful of years ago, I played a game called Journey to the Savage Planet. This was a fun little game that I enjoyed. I played the PS4 version, and it was a nice little 10-hour adventure that had a great sense of humor, a ton of funny references, and things to discover. And it was ultimately a collectathon of just going around this planet, unlocking certain areas in a kind of Metroidvania-esque way. When you get upgrades, you could adventure to new places. Now, in 2025, we've got its sequel, Revenge of the Savage Planet. And I've actually been waiting for this for quite some time because off the bat, it had some crazy changes that I was kind of on the fence for, but at the same time, I saw the promise of the idea. From the first game to the second, they are mostly similar in almost every way. But for this second one, there is a lot to distinguish it from the first game, and a lot that elevates it above it for those reasons. So let's get into those changes. The immediate ones that you will see from the first moment you look at this game is that it's in third person view now, and I absolutely love this. The third person camera definitely has you seeing how wacky and goofy the world is from a new lens. Another change is that your AI companion now follows you everywhere. And I really like this companion actually. I thought she would be a little more annoying since they're with you all the time, but I found her pretty charming and pretty funny. And there are some times when it tends to talk a little too much and get on your nerves, but I think that's like maybe 5% of the time. If you are super sensitive, that kind of thing, then you can just turn off her voice entirely or just turn down the frequency that she talks to you to your preference. So, with that brief overview, I'm going to break this into a couple parts to keep it short and sweet. How does it look? How does this game present itself? First off, this has a very vibrant art style. Everything is so damn saturated in color, and I love it. It plays off the fact that everything around you is absolutely silly, and that extends to your character who is animated straight out of a cartoon, which does also extend to the enemies and the environment around you. Everything has this very animated look. Nothing really looks static. Everything basically looks full of life at all times. Across this game, there are also a nice variety of areas to explore. They're all super visually distinct and distinct in their gameplay properties, also, which we'll get to. Now, apart from having a very nice art style, this game does run pretty well on my rig. I have a RTX 4070, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and an i9. I would hope this runs very well, but you never know nowadays. But this game runs at a nice frame rate of around 80 to 100 frames per second using native FSR anti-aliasing, at least on my PC. And since I record at the same time, you could probably expect better performance with a PC of similar power. Now, since this is a video game, let's get into how it plays and what you're going to be doing in it. So, this is a collectathon game in the best way. I say that because everything you are collecting has a tangible effect on your character, which is not always the case with these types of games. Sometimes you got collectibles for the sake of having them, which is kind of just annoying. And as you progress through the game, you will have a constant feeling of feeling more and more powerful through every discovery. And this also extends to cosmetics as well, as there are a ton of outfits to find, and some of which have some pretty dope references that I was really happy to see, some of which I will save for you. The secondary part of this game is less about the adventure part and is more about being a very light base builder. And I say very light because it's mostly a story progression based progression. But as you work your way through the main campaign missions, you're going to unlock more of your base, but it's really just animal enclosures for each planet up to a certain point. Now, these enclosures have a purpose, which we'll get to later. The best part of this base builder aspect, though, is back at your base, your actual like home building. You can customize your home with a bunch of different furnishings, toys, gadgets, and whatever else you unlock with a bunch of credits that you can find all over the planets. And don't worry, there is plenty of them to find. I had like tons, like billions of credits. Even though things are expensive, I never had an issue basically buying what I wanted when I wanted because every time I came back, I had plenty of credits to spend. So this was an instant thumbs up for me. But hey, good news if you are not into base building or like building out your own little home, then you can just skip it entirely. Now, on how it actually feels to play, I played this on mouse and keyboard, and while there's no key mapping available, the core controls do work well. Movement feels really snappy and responsive. The game doesn't really open up to you, though, fully until around the 8-hour mark. Unless you prioritize challenges, this game's way of progression through the upgrades. But when you unlock all of the movement upgrades, the game opens up in an entirely different way, letting you zip around with your whip, jump great heights and distances with your boosts, or many other traversal goodies that I don't want to spoil because they were kind of like a really you're gonna let me do that in this game? I think you just broke it kind of way. Another part of the game is using certain items found in your environment to combat creatures you find or solve puzzles. And using certain pickups against specific enemies can yield big results and have some hidden uses actually. The system has kind of built upon Journey's version of pickups in a big way, being for both traversal and combat, where Journeys was mostly for traversal and some combat things to just kind of get a small leg up. And after a while, you can purchase upgrades to let you pack around a number of these little boogers to use whenever you want at your leisure. But even with the upgrades taking a bit to acquire, the enemy variety in the game will likely carry you through, as will the puzzles. There are 4 main planets in the game, each having a mostly different fauna that you can both battle and capture, the latter of which will take different techniques depending on the creature, which I really enjoyed figuring out for each creature, and hitting the weak point on a creature will never not be satisfying as a nice, like, ping sounds like a boxing ring bell, lets you know when you're on the right track and you're hitting that right spot.
Oh, nice! That guy is bursting with fruit flavor and super corrosive acid. Great find. If you get it back to our lab, we can research it. Capture it!
I'm sure a few people out there could appreciate a real life version of that. Anyway, I gotta be honest, this game really never got stale for me. I was having some fun no matter what I was doing, even if it was just heading to another area. I was scanning, I was on the lookout, I was, being intercepted by enemies, always something going on, but not to an overwhelming degree. A very nice cadence of progression and adventure married in a way that is kind of rare nowadays when bloat is a thing, right? And trying to drag out playtime is very much a thing. Overall, I think the game actually took me like 15 hours to complete, which felt like a nice, tight amount of time that didn't overstay its welcome. And it also kind of fits in this nice pocket, given that the in game canon time your player character spends in the story is around that same time. But there is another part of this review, and that is the negatives. So even though there aren't a lot, let's talk about the few that weren't big for me, but they might be for some other people. First of all, there were some issues with visuals. Upscaling is most likely going to be needed for low to mid range PCs. This might cause some problems visually. I already noticed with native FSR anti aliasing, which isn't upscaling the image at all, there's already a lot of ghosting and trailing around your character, other objects. There's some things that kind of fade in and out in a very unnatural way, especially things in the environment that may be appearing in the background. Off my head, I can think of the clouds on one of the planets. Looking out at them, if I had anything in the foreground, like a tree or something, the clouds would almost like, in a weird artifacty way, kind of override a lot of the edges of the tree. It was kind of a strange thing. I don't think I've seen that kind of like aggressive artifacting before, and that was with the native version. So I don't know what's going to happen when you're trying this in like performance or something like that. At launch, it only had TSR and AMD FSR, which is a huge bummer. I know a lot of Game Pass games do this. They don't release with DLSS, but come on, y'all really need to. DLSS is the best of the three, and it looks so nice. FSR is a close second, but this doesn't feel like FSR 3. It feels like FSR 2, where it had a lot more like static look to it, right? It wasn't as sharp. It had a much softer image. So that might be an issue for some people. Uh, in the gameplay section of things on the negatives, finding some of the environmental items needed for some of the puzzles was frustrating. Not in a rage kind of way of frustrating, but it was getting to be quite an annoyance, as sometimes on later planets you'll need just one specific item, let's say an acid bulb, to throw for a puzzle. You may run around for a handful of minutes, 10, even 20, trying to find a single little plant that you can get these bulbs from. Worlds are not so dense as that you can't see these plants, but they are big enough that without being pinged on the map, even after discovery, it's very hard to go back and just get the pickups if you're not really good at remembering where things are and you can't kind of make a mental map and note of where they are. That was kind of an issue for me. There is also a couple of like weird progression blocking quests. And I say specifically progression blocking because I could really feel that they were there specifically just to pad out the time for a bit. One of which was just finding these funny clones of myself around the forest area that were really hard to spot. And there were around 50 of them. 50, 54, I think. So you bet it took a while to find them. And while they were pretty funny in their little Easter eggy kind of way with the different poses and stuff, it really did feel like progression and everything just kind of hit the brakes all of a sudden, just so we could take care of this. With all that in mind, I absolutely just loved this game beginning to end. And even though it's on Game Pass, I will buy like an actual version of this game. I'm probably going to buy it on PS5 because that's what we play on our living room TV. And I plan on playing this split screen because it's completely cross-play and it's just a good time. And I think this could be a good time with your buddies. It could be a good time with your kids. It could even be a great time with your girlfriend or your boyfriend. Like, I don't see people just not having any amount of fun in this game, especially with its unique sense of humor and its great sense of adventure. So that's my review, folks. And while I don't have any kind of numbered or ranking system, I can safely say that I recommend this game to just about anyone. But now, that is all from me, and we have come to a close. I hope you have enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. Thanks so much for stopping by. Until next time, peace.